Hey everyone, Mick here again with Josh.
What episode is this?
It's Chapter 3, Episode 3, I think. Losing track here. So we've covered, what soil is, what it's made up of, how to kind of test for that. And so now we're going to go into moisture content and density and how that affects soil. So I'm just going to let Josh go off on here because he knows what he wants to do here.
Actually, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I'll make it up. So, we're going to talk about moisture content and density. So, of course, I want to always just skip straight to density because essentially what that means is compaction and using my second favorite tool. You can take out so much aggression with this when you're building trail. We'll get to that in a second. And I did set this here because it's my favorite tool. But,
I think that's every trail builder's favorite tool.
Second favorite tool. All right, so moisture content. What moisture content is the amount of water inside your soil. So typically in engineering world, it's going to be portrayed as percent. But for our trail building etiquette and working out in the field, we're going to say it's wet, it's too wet, or it's too dry. Almost never have I heard someone say, this is perfect. And I've actually never had a phone call of someone, hey Josh, come look at this. It is the perfect soil, or this is the perfect rock. And no, I always get the call, oh man, this stuff's so bad we don't know what to do. So that's typically what you're going to run into. So how to look at those and how to look at a soil and know if it's too wet. We are going to do a little demo with crushed rock. So it's actually a 5/8 minus. So that means the biggest rock size in it is 5/8 of an inch diameter. And it's crushed, and then so it has a bunch of fines in it as well. I find crushed rock is an easy one to use as a resource because it's really easy to see visually when it's too dry or it's too wet or it's compacting just right. When you start getting into the silts and the soils from like we were showing at the last episode, it can be a little trickier to tell if it's compacting well or not. So for this beginner one, we're just going to use crushed rock. So what we have here is a bucket of 5/8 minus rock. And this one is nice and dry. Okay? We also have a bucket of 5/8 minus crushed rock that is very saturated. Okay? And you can see how much water's in that. It's wet. So what we're going to be doing is putting that into these very nicely constructed compaction boxes. Mick made these just for this test, so I feel kind of honored. We're going to start with the dry one. And so just for a test, for an example, we're going to put this in here. Okay. And it's probably hard to see on this camera, but Mick will do some fancy editing for the other camera. I'm just smoothing it out flat so that we can see exactly the height that that's at. And before I do my favorite part of the job, I should tell you about moisture content, compaction, density. All soil is made up of, essentially three things. There's soil, so the particles, the sand, rock, gravel, the stuff we've been talking about. There's air voids, so there's, air pockets inside of it. And then there's water is the third one. So all soil has those three things. In this case, there's going to be very little water, but there is still moisture content in there. But there's a lot of air voids because we just loosely dumped it in, and rocks are sitting on top of each other. And so, as a demonstration, you have all the air voids in between all those rocks. So when you're doing compaction, and people talk about density of the soil and compaction, what that is essentially is making those void spaces smaller. So this is just a nice, what is this one, Mick?
8" by 8".
An 8" by 8" compaction. So all we're going to do is pack the soil down. And did you get a before shot?
I did.
All right.
Let's go ahead and show.
Do we have a pen?
I could probably grab a pen real quick.
Yeah, grab a pen real quick, and I'll entertain them with my good looks. Okay, so now that we have our trusty dusty pencil, what we're going to do is make a little mark right here on this box. I'll do it on this side so you can see it good. So there is the line where our dry soil is. Now we're going to compact it and we'll see how much less we can make this. So compacting on a trail. Woo! Yeah, look at that dust going. Give it a couple good whacks. You don't want to go too thick of a lift. And so what too thick of a lift means is how thick the soil is. So if you're having to dig soil over here because you have a good sandy gravel pit over here, and you want to move that onto your trail, your lift is going to be the height of the soil that you put on there before you compact it. So in this case, we're putting probably about an 8-inch lift in, and we're compacting it, which is a pretty big lift for trail building actually. Usually you have 2 or 3 guys working together, and so 2 guys can be shoveling, or one guy shoveling and throwing dirt out, one guy scraping with a rake, and the third guy just whacking away. Which I don't know why I like it so much. Take my aggression out on this thing. So just pack that for a few minutes. You can see it gives it a nice surface, but it's also shrunk almost 2 inches. It's compacted down almost 2 inches. So compaction is a big deal. However, this soil is extremely dry. You saw that when it's compacting it. The dust is coming up, so it's too dry. So now we're going to do the same demo with too wet of soil. Hopefully it's too wet. We added some water a little while ago and a leaf. But yeah, so we got this nice wet soil we're going to dump into the box. We'll do the same thing. We'll spread out so it's nice and flat. So this would, if you were doing this on a trail, that would be the guy raking. So he rakes it flat. And then your compactor guy, pencil. How did we lose that one? There it is. So make a mark where this thing is. Then, did you get a good shot of that bad boy?
Oh, yeah.
Nice piece of grass. All right. It even feels different when you start packing. Well, this might be actually pretty close to optimum moisture. This thing's packing good. You can see not as much dust coming up in my face this time. So, after just a few hits, I'd say we've gone down almost 3.5, 4 inches. And it's nice, flat, solid thing, but it can be deceiving. So in this, even when I felt it like that, I can feel it's too wet. I can feel it still mush when it's too wet. But it looks a lot better. And in a trail building application, I would actually let this go and keep people off it for a couple days, because that water is going to seep out of this type of soil, because it's essentially rock and sand. So in this case, when you have, crushed rock, handy, your trail building is okay to be a little too wet. If you were using a bunch of silt and clay, it would not be okay. It would not dry. The water's not going to seep out of it. So you want to be careful what time of year you're working on that trail, or allowing traffic across it. So I would keep people off for maybe 2 days. This wet crushed rock would dry up almost instantly, and then you'd be fine. You have a nice hard pack trail. So now that we've done that demo, what we'll do is we'll mix these two together, recompact it, and see how much better it does. So now that we're combining these two types of soils, this is just us making a demo. I'm going to mix these up real good. And to do that, you can just shake the buckets. Pretty good. Alright. So now, let's use the dry one. There's still a bunch of water moisture on this other one. And we'll fill it up to that original line. So now you can see we've mixed the dry and the wet rock together. And we'll fill it up to that line. Oh, maybe a little too much.
Breathing close enough to the line.
Close enough for government work on that one. That's what I would say. So now we have a soil that is pretty darn near to optimum moisture content, and we're going to compact this one. And sometimes you got to turn your square hammer just because. Alright, so now we have compacted this one. You see it's probably only gone down about 2 inches, and but the surface is solid. I mean, that's some hard gravel right there. Moisture content will play a big difference in your soil for trail building, and it's important to understand what that difference is. If I was just out in the field, so the last couple tidbits before we sign off, I feel like I'm talking all day here. Make sure you're not building in too wet of conditions or too dry. If you're doing it too dry, it's just going to turn to dust and blow away. If you're doing it too wet, it's just going to be sloshy and run around on you. It'll be really tough to control the shape of your trail. And that's actually why I like this tool for shaping. It has a little bit of curve to it, so it makes shaping really easy. But this is the ultimate trail compaction right here. There's even a bigger one, but if you're packing in very far, you don't want to carry that big one. So that's all I got for moisture and soil density, Mick.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh. We'll end up with this episode. Thanks a lot for this. This is really great information. I'm sure there's a lot of information here. A lot of people are just going to be like, way too much information. But when you get out in the field and you start working with this dirt, it just starts making sense.
Yeah.
Like,
and so when you have questions, ask Mick. But yeah, happy to answer any questions about soil and what soils to use for trails or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Josh. And, we might do another couple episodes after this one, just maybe back in the studio with some just some drainage tests. He came across one, so
erosion control
with drainage tests. Until next time, thank you very much.